Welcome back, everyone. Yes, we are ploughing through today, I would say. What a fantastic day so far. What have we had? Well, I'm going to tell you so you can go and catch up because that's what you do. Start off with Commercial Dance with the wonderful Josh Flegg. Then we had Fit Steps with Jade and Jenna. Two great sessions. To keep us fit going into the next lockdown. Then we had Text Analysis for Actors with Philippe Buscher, which was an awesome session. And coming up, we have Tina Kilberg talking about contracts for actors, which is awesome. A little bit about kindness. The Twitter sphere is a disaster at the moment. Businesses, actors, all of it. It's just, let's all just breathe. Let's just in through the nose, 4 seconds, hold it for 4 and out for 4. We all know it's a chaotic world at the moment. But I think looking at a lot of what's going on, things are coming from good intention. So before you jump on it, do a bit of research on things, breathe, take some time, because as we know, if you're angry tweeting, it's only getting you more wound up and it's creating your anxiety probably more than the person that you're tweeting about. So let's all be kind. Let's be kind, people. We're all just trying to get through the day. Isn't that right? Okay, I'm going to bring the wonderful Tina in now, and she will tell you all about today's session. How are you doing?
Hello, everyone. I'm great. How are you?
Awesome. Really, thank you so much for coming on here. What I love, and
thank you for having me. Yes,
absolutely. What Rosie and I have tried to do with the CCI is when we're on social media and someone said something like, we had way back in the beginning, someone was talking about representation for Indian actors in the industry and Asian actors. I was like, come on and talk about it. And then you tagged on the tweet where I had tweeted about contracts, be careful, Reed.
Yes.
And you tweeted and we were like, come on and talk about it. And we love that.
Yeah.
And that's really what this has been about, because we just wanted the CCI to have as many sessions as possible surrounding the industry and as much variation as possible. So thank you for tweeting.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm actually really glad that I'm collaborating with a London company, because I actually did my master's in entertainment law at the University of Westminster. I'm not working in London, so I'm mostly dealing with Californian law and Canadian law, because I've mostly been working as a contract negotiator between Vancouver and LA. But I am aware of English law because my master's was done in England. So I think actually what I want to do is, because I was just given this gift to just study in the UK and do this master's, I think what I have to do in return is just help as many actors as possible who are in the UK and just make them understand that, they have the prerogative to recognize what their rights are in this industry.
Brilliant. Absolutely love that. So where are you today? Where in the world?
So I'm actually currently in Greece. I'm here for some time, but yeah, I've been working from home with Vancouver, which is just so funny because I'm thinking about all these deadlines that I have for all these contracts. There's a film production that they've postponed their production, yet basically they're meant to shoot next summer, but I've been basically writing up their contracts for just everyone. Film crew, actors, directors, screenwriters, just everyone, co-production companies. And I keep thinking about like the deadline. I'm like, oh my God, my deadline's on Tuesday, but over there, it's like, it's not even Tuesday. So, but I like to be punctual. So, but it's nice working from a distance. Yeah.
Love that. Well, look, Tina, I'm going to love and leave you, and I'll see you in around 50 minutes.
Of course.
So have a fabulous session.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, so something I really want to talk about is, before I get started on talking about different types of contracts, I want to explain a bit about the history of how contracts used to work. So this was particularly prominent in the 1950s in Hollywood and other film industries in Britain, France, Italy, Spain, everywhere, Germany, just everywhere all around the globe, even Asia. They would retaliate this process. So in the 1950s, the way it used to work, there would be a studio system. So actors were signed to a studio and they were bound to a 7-year contract. And it was the studio's duty to turn all the actors that they would take into starlets. And And in the meantime, this created a lot of problems because they would promote a suspension clause, which would prevent an actor from working in other projects after the 7-year contract ended. So this was the studio's way of keeping actors bound to their studio. So this occurred until 1942, because this was where Olivia de Havilland, she was a film noir actress who passed away this year. She took this matter into her own hands, and she decided that she didn't want to be bound to a studio contract for 7 years plus 14 years. So she had a dispute with Warner Brothers, and she won the case in 1943. And this influenced California to develop the de Havilland Law, which is also known as California Civil Code 2855. So this is a law that rules that actors are not bound to perform services beyond 7 years from the start of their contract. I think even though this is how things used to work and we've progressed a little more, I think it's very important to understand the discrimination that happens and the exploitation that occurs amongst actors, because this has been largely prevalent across the years. And we're talking about at a time that actors weren't able to overcome such issues. And Marilyn Monroe, for instance, she was with 20th Century Fox. I think she signed a contract with them around 1950, 1951. So she actually had to escape California, and she moved to New York City for a certain time period so she could escape her contract with them. And what a lot of people don't know was that she actually opened her own production company called Marilyn Monroe Productions. So a lot of people don't realize that actors have done a lot of things. So I think it's important to realize that these are actors who have kind of influenced the law. Olivia de Havilland influenced California lawmakers to redistribute and reconsider a few things that were wrong. And even actors like Marilyn Monroe, her only choice was to escape, but she managed to do something amazing with that, to escape her contract. So in today's day and age, this no longer happens. But there are two types of contracts that are largely prevalent in the film industry. And these are oral contracts and written contracts, and they are both valid. So oral contracts are unsigned agreements. So you could verbally agree with someone over a meeting, over lunch, which is something that is largely prevalent in the American film industry. I can confirm this because most film directors and film modules, what they do is they go for lunch. So there's actually a large saying among entertainment lawyers who work in California. There's this argument that filmmakers, they don't do contracts, they do lunch. So an oral contract is largely valid. It's an agreement. The only problem with oral contracts is that it's very hard to validate the evidence of one. So this is where written contracts may appear more preferable because they're signed deals, and they're preferable as well for lawmakers as well, because in the case of a potential dispute, a signed deal provides a sense of validity. But the issue is, from what I have seen as well, is that generally the film industry prefers oral contracts. And I think the main Hollywood argument, and not just in the US, but probably in Britain as well, is that due to the fast pace and spontaneous nature of the industry, filmmakers just want to be making films. They don't want to be writing contracts. And the argument that most people use in the film industry is that written contracts take up too much of their time and they just want to get straight to production. So what happens is they engage in oral contracts, and usually a written agreement is signed during post-production. So this can create a lot of difficulties for actors because the production has the power to fire them at any point in time in between pre-production and production, and actors don't have any evidence to validate their oral contract. Before I decide to discuss a few hypothetical scenarios and how to overcome difficulties in terms of contracts, I think it's very important for actors to be well informed about legal disputes. There's an ongoing kind of mentality or idea, which I'd like to clarify as false, which is that people assume that famous people can get away or they can overcome difficulties in oral contracts. And something that I would like to clarify is that it doesn't matter where you are in your career as an actor, you have the prerogative to recognize what your legal rights are. And you should always fight for your bargaining power, no matter how many credits you have on your resume, on IMDb. So it's important to recognize that legal disputes have occurred amongst, A-list actors as well. So I'll just list three very quickly. In 1996, John Travolta got sued by Mandalay Entertainment because he breached a contract with them after he decided to walk off set. And he ended up winning the trial because he said that there was an oral agreement, but he never agreed to a written contract. So the studio didn't really have any evidence to validate that there was a contract to begin with. This may have been wrong of him because even though he agreed to an oral contract, he should have, stuck to that. But he was able to defend himself with the argument that there was no evidence of a written contract. So there's another one with Kim Basinger. She actually lost a trial against Mainline Pictures for the film Boxing Helena, and she was taken to court over a dispute in terms of the terms and the contract. So she claims that she didn't agree to nude scenes and that wasn't clear in the written deal, but it was actually largely prevalent, and there was a form of miscommunication and she misread the contract. So it's important to make sure you know what you're getting into. This is an issue that has occurred in recent years as well, with an actress, Anne Green. She also lost a trial against HBO's Cinemax for the TV series Femme Fatales. And this was, again, based on the context of nudity and sex scenes. I think they sued her with $85,000, which is, or probably even more. And the issue was that they clarified not only in the terms of the contract, but before she started applying for the auditions, they had sent her a demo reel of scenes from previous episodes where sex scenes were involved. So she was actually quite informed that this was the nature of the series. So there was a bit miscommunication over there. So these, it's very common to get into legal disputes with even, A-list actors get into legal disputes. And I think for them, it's kind of worse because the costs are higher and at the same time, you could really damage your reputation. But there is one way to get around this, which is through using pay-or-play language. So a pay-or-play language, it's a deal that you can ask to be included in your contract. And this is when a production company pays an actor, even if they end up not using their production services. And actors are able to negotiate on this deal regardless of where they are in their acting career. You don't have to be an A-list or established working actor to ask for this deal. So you can ask for a pay-or-play agreement and walk out on the project like Travolta did. I mean, it's not ideal, but if you agree to do something, you should be punctual, but at times it happens. And this is something I'm going to discuss in the further examples below, because I think for actors, the most important thing sometimes is survival. And as politically correct we try to be, and as right we try to be in terms of following the rules and the law, sometimes we have to fight for our careers and we have to make selfish choices. So I'm going to talk about ways to overcome any problems that you may create through legal means. So this is the first hypothetical scenario that I'd like to talk about. So I'm going to give you a description of your situation and ways you can overcome it. So let's just say you are a working actor who has been signed by a talent agency. So you agree to meet with an independent film director over a business lunch, and he wants you to take part in his film. And you decide to meet with him without informing your agent, because it's an independent production and maybe you don't want your agent getting 10% and you want the full payment. And maybe because it's so independent, they don't need any material from your agency. So you decide to meet with the director by yourself. So he pitches the script very briefly to you and proposes that you play a particular character. And you agree to this agreement orally. So you have an agreement and you shake hands, and that's legitimate. So he agrees to stay in touch with you over the next few months to inform you about the production period. And in the meantime, your talent agent calls you and proposes a few auditions that you might go to in the next few weeks for small roles, but you reject all of his suggestions because you haven't told him about the meeting that you had with the indie film director, and you just want to keep your schedule available until you hear from the director. You never hear from him again. So after maybe a month or two, you decide to take the matters into your own hands and call him and ask him, you know, what's happening with the film? When have you decided to get into the production process? And he tells you, well, we have already began filming and decided to hire another actor to take your place instead. So you're a bit disappointed that you formed an oral contract with him, which confirmed that you'd get the acting job, but in the end you didn't. But you don't want to sue him because you might lose and you don't have the evidence to support it. And it wouldn't be very, I mean, you wouldn't be suing an independent company. You probably wouldn't be making much money anyway, and you probably wouldn't care. So this is what I want to clarify, because I think most people don't understand how largely prevalent oral contracts are in the film industry. Oral contracts are commonly used in the film industry, not just in the United States or Canada, just everywhere, even in European film markets. And this is because there are close ties and strong relationships between film industry players. And this is why oral contracts are so convenient, because it encourages them to build a level of trust. And that's what this industry is about. It's all about building relationships. So when film industries are made up of small circles with a vast amount of power, an oral contract is something that you use to enhance your reputation and to prove that you are trustworthy, whether you're an actor or a filmmaker. So what's interesting is actually Quentin Tarantino, he's actually known as your go-to director, who goes where you go with and meet with him for a business lunch, and that's how he hires you on. So actually Margot Robbie, she actually agreed to an oral contract with him, and she actually set up a meeting with him over lunch for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So unsigned deals are usually difficult to proceed if an actor has not built a level of trust with the director, but that doesn't mean they're impossible. At the same time, however, getting out of an oral contract deal would be much harder for someone like Tarantino, because he's a public figure. And if he did such a thing, that could harm his reputation. So even though an actor who feels they are less established, they may think that they have less bargaining power and they would not be able to circumvent this situation. However, in the case of this hypothetical scenario where you engaged in an oral contract, just because you weren't an established actor, you might think, does this mean that your old contract deal was illegitimate? Well, no, absolutely not. The issue here is that you did not have the evidence to file against the indie director, and you also didn't inform your talent agent in order for him to confirm and support the business deal. And that's why you were left to your own devices. And in which case, what you would have to do is create immediate evidence for your oral contract deal. So you have two options to validate this in the case of the hypothetical scenario. Something you could do is get a piece of paper out during your business lunch, and you ask the indie director to sign the piece of paper agreeing that you'll take part in his film production. And he could write 2 sentences to agree with that. This is actually used, I've seen this in real life. Actually, I've been in meetings where screenwriters wanted to hire directors and work and collaborate with actors. And I've seen people pull out pieces of paper, write up a deal, take a picture with their iPhone and literally save it. And that is evidence. And another evidence would be to send the indie director or anyone else, if you decide to do this in real life, an email confirming your meeting over lunch. So you follow up through your business deal by asking them to verify and confirm to this agreement through digital means. So what I want to confirm here is that neither of the two options require the use of legal terminology, because none of you are likely to be law graduates, and you want to avoid a lack of clarity by keeping it as simple as possible so you can reach a mutual understanding with the other party involved, and so no problems occur later in terms of misunderstanding what the contract terms were. So that's the first case scenario. In the second case, I would like to talk about a case where, as an actor, it may be your fault for the decisions that you've made. and two ways you could get out of it. So once I give this example, I'm going to be talking about pair play agreements in more detail, and also a lack of mutual misunderstanding in the context of looking at the legal terms of the contract. So let's say this time around, you are an independent actor who was auditioned for a supporting role in a film, and you received a call back and landed the job. So you signed a written contract with the production, and you need to be in the studio for filming 3 times a week. So in the process of the production period, you're highly demotivated with the role and you just want it to be over. And in the meantime, you're on different online platforms, looking at different casting calls, trying to apply for different roles. And when you're not on set, because you're only there 3 times a week, you're searching for other roles you can get casted in the next few months to just keep yourself busy. So you discover an independent film that has open castings, and you're intrigued by the role and the storyline. And you decide to go to that audition and you get the role. And you receive a phone call from the casting director who tells you that filming will begin much earlier, and it will begin in 2 months from now instead of, let's say, 5. So let's say in the meantime, the film that you are currently working on has delayed its production due to financial issues, and its production period will end in 5 months from now instead of 1. And you decide to drop out of the project and invest in the other film. The director you initially worked with is furious, and the film production threatens you with a lawsuit, which they are able to do, and it's harder for you to escape because you have agreed to a written contract. What do you do? Well, firstly, is there a legitimate way in which an actor can redeem themselves from a signed contract deal? Yes, of course there is. Where there is a will, there is a way, as the saying goes. And this is achieved by the terms you agree to in the contract. So as the saying goes, which a lot of lawyers like to use, or law graduates, is that the devil's in the detail. So even though you agree to a written contract, you can still win them over. And there's 2 ways to go around this. So one is the pay or play agreement, which is what I spoke about earlier. So when you agree to a pay or play deal in your contract, you are contracted to get the full pay rate, regardless if you decide to drop out of the production. And regardless if even they decide to use all of your services, they pay you the full amount. And this guarantee is a legal obligation that's imposed on the film production. And they have to pay the actor, even if they decide not to use the actor's services, and even if the actor decides not to, follow through it. So a lot of actors get hired on a pay or play basis, given that a lot of film studios as well, they may terminate an actor for several reasons. This could happen because maybe the director and actor are not getting along on set. The studio is not happy with the actor's services, or maybe the studio has not acquired the finance required to proceed with the film as initially scheduled. So sometimes it's not through the fault of your own, and sometimes life happens, people don't get along at work, but because you've signed a contract deal, they're not allowed to just fire you and not pay you. So pay or play agreement, protects an actor and makes sure that they get paid. So this, in terms of a contract, because in the contracts that I've written personally for different actors, a pay or play deal is not usually included in every kind of deal. An actor may have to ask for it, in which case I would write up a different deal, but it would be stated in very simple terms, such as if at any time producer/production company decides not to require actor services, producer/production company is obligated to render a payment of fixed compensation. So, and actually, I think something that we should take from A-list actors, for instance, is that, because they've been battling for their career for years, they will not consider an offer unless it is a pay or play deal. And this is something that I think should be applied amongst all actors when they're fighting for their bargaining rights. It's important to recognize, under the eyes of the law, all actors are equal. And you can fight for your bargaining power regardless of where you are in your career, because these rights, they're not just granted to well-established actors. So, you need to make sure that you need to make sure that you don't underestimate your power in negotiation, because under the eyes of the law, all actors are equal, like humans. All humans are equal, and I think that's the most important lesson of all. If there's anything I want you to take from the session today, it's that you must validate your own worth as an actor and believe that you have the power in negotiation, and to not give your power away to all these film studios and film modules, and to just empower yourself in the process. So this is one way. Now, in terms of this scenario, it was certainly wrong of you to step out of it, because you initially agreed to a project, and therefore it was certainly wrong of you to sign a written contract and not follow through your duties in the middle of the production period. However, actors have to make important decisions for their career as a means of survival. And for this reason, sometimes that's understandable. And sometimes you have to fight your way through things. And one way that you can get around this is through lack of mutual understanding. So this is actually a legal term that is used a lot in court when there's a lot of legal disputes between actors and film productions. You could use the argument that if you think that the contract appears ambiguous and unclear, and you have a different interpretation on the deal, the written deal then works against the film production's favor, because they have failed to make the terms clear to both parties. And a lack of mutual intention with the other party will raise difficulties in agreements as usual. So despite the written contract initiating a bounding agreement, a lack of mutual understanding is your weapon to fight against the signed deal as an actor. And for actors, if a written contract fails to express the real intention of your behalf, this will be taken into account in the rise of the legal dispute. So this applies amongst all types of laws in different countries. I'm only familiar with Californian law in terms of US law, because laws are different in every state, but I'm sure there's an equivalent in English law in terms of fraud. So in California, there's a civil code in section 1640, which mentions when through fraud, mistake, or accident, a written contract fails to express the real intention of the parties, such intention is to be regarded and the erroneous parts of the writing disregarded. And this is something that I actually came across when I was studying English law. So I can't remember the exact law number, but this exists in English law for anyone who's an actor in Britain and who's currently watching. So you can use this to help yourself out. And usually I wouldn't encourage actors to lie about their situation and to blame a studio, but I do understand that being an actor is already difficult enough. You're already dealing with people who have 9-to-5 corporate jobs, and they're very misunderstanding, and they probably think what you're doing is not a serious career, or that you need a second career. So there's so much, not competition. Well, there's so much competition on the inside the industry, but on the outside, there's so much judgment and criticism that you have to constantly protect yourself. And as I mentioned earlier, actors have to make important decisions sometimes for their career as a means of survival, and sometimes that involves selfish means. So every opportunity, every film opportunity taken or lost is an act of survival, and every audition is an opportunity to act. So at times, actors have to be selfish in order to survive in this industry, and it may involve having to scrutinize a deal and having to fight against what doesn't serve your career or your interests. So in a legal sense, or maybe an ethical sense rather, your choice may be considered a wrongdoing and that you're manipulating the circumstance to get your way out of it. But in a kind of personal or creative sense, you are above all an actor who is constantly at war with those in power in order to redefine your right to artistic integrity. And it's absolutely fine to, fight your way through that. So a third case scenario is a real life experience, actually, which is something that I'd like to share. So, at the very start of my acting career, so I've mostly been working as an entertainment legal consultant and a contract negotiator. And then I started getting into acting myself. At the very start of my career, I used social platforms such as, Backstage and LA Casting to search for work because I didn't have an agent or a talent agency to represent me. So I used Backstage for a period of time, which is a universal platform. It's global and it helps, well, not universal, not on other planets, but, on Earth, sure, you can get work anywhere. It's a global platform where they help actors apply for different casting calls and auditions and, different types of roles. And this is regardless of where you are in whichever city, whichever country. So back then I came across an MTV casting call for Ghosted Love Gone Missing, where the producer, Brooklyn Bagwell, she wanted actors to share stories about either themselves getting ghosted or ghosting someone else. So I decided to apply for this. And in the meantime, I brainstormed a few ideas I could share if I heard back from this production. So I came up with a really funny story to share, which, I mean, it wasn't a fake story, it was a real story. I just had to brainstorm funny stories from my past, which involved ghosting. And I decided to save it on my Max notes. So I didn't send it to her right away. And I heard back from them eventually, and they asked me to share my story with them. And because there wasn't a proper confirmation that I would take part in the production, I was a bit suspicious, and I was fairly new to Backstage, so I wasn't sure how trustworthy it was as a website. And what I decided to do was send Brooklyn a message before submitting my story to make sure that it wouldn't get stolen or used by another actor. And here's a small segment I've actually listed, which is what I sent her. I want to clarify in this message that by sharing any information regarding my ghosting story, I'm expecting this to remain confidential as of now and not be taken and exposed by another actor or participator in your project. For this reason, please confirm to my agreement and let me know if this can be a binding contract deal. I think that terrified her, to be honest. So as you can imagine, Brooklyn never replied to my message or contacted me again. And this is why I've become very careful. And this is why I encourage actors to be very clear on making agreements. You don't have to use legal terminology. I think legal terminology scares people, which is why it's probably why film productions and, filmmakers, they don't like, I mean, the film industry as a whole, they don't like written contracts because they assume that lawyers are just going to take all their money off their budget and they just prefer oral agreements or writing contracts themselves. But I mean, the truth of the matter is it needs to be as simple as possible. So I wrote to her, I tried to be as simple as possible in my message and basically tell her, I'm happy to share the story with you, but I want to confirm that this will not be stolen or taken and portrayed by another actor and that I can receive full credit for this. So although Backstage is a certified casting website, I decided to cancel my membership because there was too much inactivity going on and there were a lot of fake profiles. And personally, I never heard from Brooklyn again, but I did come across a lot of people in the next few months who had told me about their experiences, people who had worked with her personally, and they said that actually she wasn't a trustworthy person and she was using Backstage to steal ideas from different people globally. And then she already had a production with people that she would hire. So I didn't know that at the time, but I'm very glad that I was, careful about it. So my advice, something that I want you to take from this scenario, which is a real case, is that if you don't receive a confirming statement, it's best for you to leave it and move forward and avoid getting into fights. The purpose of, law and settling legal disputes is that people are no longer fighting with each other and they can just move along, and the less legal disputes, the better. And, the reason why lawmakers and, lawyers and everyone just prefers a written contract is because they want to make sure that it can be validated and there's evidence to prove something so people aren't taken into court. Because, believe it or not, people don't want seeing actors being taken to court against film productions and, you know, being sued with a large amount of money. I think at the end of the day, we just want people to thrive and create. And you know, this is particularly why unions and agencies exist, to protect actors from creative and financial exploitation, as well as to guarantee a minimum wage for services performed. And relationships, as well as in the film industry in itself, relationships play a key role in the deal making process. So, what a lot of actors fail to realize in their acting career is that 90% of your success depends upon how you take action when a deal is ready to be made, and whether you're ready to fight when you need to and to play fair. Once a level of trust is established between two negotiating parties, each party is more likely to accept the other party's offer and what their proposals are. So I think an actor's, you know, career, from what I have seen myself, is that from others, is that it can either be the most difficult thing in the world to pursue, or it can be the easiest thing to do. And a way to make things easier is to discover that, you know, once you learn how to make the right deals with the right people and you see what works for you, your acting career can just turn into a game. And then you've networked with the right people, and you kind of have a sense of intuition to recognize when people are being genuine or sincere, and you know what doesn't work for you. And you know, you really do have to fight for your career in this day and age, and find ways to be creative and to constantly, you know, work through it. These are the two main types of contracts, but due to COVID-19 especially, and not just due to COVID-19, but, you know, I think the only good thing about COVID-19 is that I feel like it's created so many more jobs in terms of digital jobs, like working online and working from home. So a third type of contract is digital contracts. So these are electronic contracts, also known as e-contracts. So these are very simple. They are basically in a digital format. So it could be as simple as a Google Docs document and just emailing that to someone and saying, you know, you're going to participate in this production, sign this contract. Or it could be as simple as, I've actually seen this in meetings where I've been present, where I've seen people agree to an actor's contract deal simply by signing an electronic signature through an iPad. So a producer actually had an iPad on him, and he asked the actor to sign it electronically. So I think digital contracts, they're very, I think they're very strange, and I think a lot of people will find that they're very unfamiliar with digital contracts, so they're not favorable of them. But I think digital contracts is the perfect line between written and oral, because it's essentially a written contract, but you can have it with you when you sign an oral, well, you don't sign it, but when you have an oral agreement with someone, they can sign it digitally. And I think even an email, so in the first example that I gave, you know, trying to validate evidence of an oral contract by sending an email, that could kind of be a digital contract, because if someone emails you back and confirms to it, that's a digital agreement. So the purpose as to why I've decided to name this session The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was because during my master's at the University of Westminster, my dissertation focused on different types of contracts in the film industry. And I decided to go by the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good being the conventional written deal, the bad being oral contracts, and the ugly being digital e-contracts because of their unfamiliarity. So I think with digital contracts, unfortunately, because it's largely prevalent due to the growing digitalization of the industry, in the past few years, there have been no legal cases or legal disputes in relation to a digital contract. So what I can confirm for the time being is that digital contracts have been largely successful in the film industry. And I think the fact that there haven't been any disputes or any problems arising, I think goes to show that this is, you know, the best way of working. And I guess the best contract deal that creates a balance of both. So this is something that I think should be considered, and I think is very important. And I think that's about it. I think I've managed to talk about everything that I needed to, and I'm happy to answer questions when needed. So I think that's about it. So I just wanted to clarify and give a few, you know, hypothetical scenarios that could happen, ways to overcome it. But I'm obviously happy to answer questions as well.